back for the third solder sample, which is a butt joint. I mean, not a butt joint, excuse me, a sweat solder joint. And this is my Oreo cookie one, where we're gonna flow solder on one of the sides, put them together, and then reflow the solder. What's lovely about sweat soldering is that you can stack them. So I got my little bullseye. The first one I put down was the biggest circle, and I used hard solder with that. And then the next one I put down was medium solder, and you can see that there's a little bit of a shadow of solder all the way around. So I know that the icing is in there, and I know that these pieces are soldered down really well. So this is a challenging one to do because usually you have to heat the piece up more than you would think, and you have to have the right amount of solder. So when you get ready to do the sweat soldering, you want to think about the same three things everybody else solder joints do. What type of metals you're using and what size they are. And so this is a little less than half. And then when I look at the thickness, my brass is just a teeny bit thicker. Okay, so the first thing you want to know about sweat soldering is we want to take the smaller of the two pieces and we want to turn it upside down, and we want to clean it. And we want to flow solder all over this. And then what we'll do is we'll set this on top and we'll reheat it from the underside, and that will make the solder reflow and bond the two together. Okay. If I put the solder here, it's going to go everywhere, and then I'm going to have a lot more cleanup. So always choose to put your sweat soldered pieces on your smaller piece. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to set up that piece, and I'm going to set this one up down here because this is basically, I'm just going to coat the surface of my triangle with solder, and I'm going to show you it with just solder chips. I will also show you how we can stick feed sweat solder joints as you guys get a little bit better at soldering. So the thing about sweat soldering is you need to use more solder than you would think. And so I've got to cut a few more chips. So remember when you're cutting that you're cutting strips that are about 1/16 of an inch, and then you're catching them in your finger. My solder chips can be a little bit bigger for this one because we're going to get it to flow, and then it'll spread out, and then it'll reflow easier because it's spread out. And then I'm going to add a little bit of flux to it. I know some people don't flux their solder chips. There's enough flux usually on the metal piece that it doesn't matter, but what I want you to notice is I'm putting solder chips along the edge because the solder is going to want to pull in, and I want to make sure that I get complete coverage, or what I'm looking for is 80% coverage of this brass triangle. So if I don't get enough solder on it, then there'll be air pockets, and then when I go to heat the piece, I'll get little bumps in it that you're not going to like. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces of solder. And this is the fun thing because you really get to see the solder flowing. And what you're going to continue to be looking for is when the solder looks metallic, and then when you pull the flame away, it becomes matte again. And you can see how quickly that happens. So I always say to my students, even Superman would not be fast enough to melt this and throw it up on there and get it to flow. If I stacked this on top of here and heated it, I'd have a gap, so it wouldn't solder. So what you want to do is you want to coat the smaller piece with silver solder, and you notice that I'm drying it out very slowly. The flux is turning white. It's at about 300 degrees. I'm going to keep heating it. The reason why I cut triangles for you is the tips can melt really easily. So when you're working, pay attention to the thinner spots of your metal. The flux has gone clear. That's about 1100 degrees. They're going to start to ball up. That's the melting point, and then there's the flow point. And this is where I should show you guys. You can take your solder pick and you can spread the solder around. Whew. Okay, So you want at least 80% coverage. I've got pretty much 100% coverage on this, which is pretty amazing. Were we able to see?
Yeah, it was
that?
Kind of incredible.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna flip it up. I'm gonna slide it in place. And then I'm gonna say to myself, if this is not level, when the flux goes liquid, it's gonna hydroplane. And I can see right now that I gotta pull the legs out. I need to have this level. And then I'm also gonna have my torch in my non-dominant hand so that if I need to, I can push down to hold that from flipping. And one of the things I like to do is take my interlocking tweezers and do that so that when I push down, this doesn't flip over, because I may need to push down on this. Okay, so the trick here is you don't really see the solder flow. You can see it come out around the edges. You can, when you're first learning, put a solder chip right on the edge, and that'll be your, you know, you're telling you that it's flowing. But I'm going to come in from underneath. Going to start heating. Not going to go in past that blue cone because I'll lose all my heat, and then you hear a different sound. Okay. So I'm heating for underneath because this piece hasn't been heated yet. The flux has gone clear on it now, and it's getting quite liquid. So I'm going to come up top, and I'm going to work just right around the outside edge. And you can see some of the solder come up from the top, but can you see that solder flowing around that edge? There you go. And you also saw how bright red it got. So that's why when you're learning to silver solder on silver, sweat soldering takes some practice. So I'm surprised that the solder came up to the top. But why did it come up to the top? It came up to the top because it was hotter. But now that I'm looking, do I have solder along these edges? And it looks like it, but I never know till after I pickle it. Okay, so that's sweat soldering. What's neat about sweat soldering is now I can take and I can run this through the rolling mill, and I can press this top piece down into it if I wanted to. And I call that fake inlay. You're soldering pieces on and then rolling them through the rolling mill. And we'll probably be doing that when I demonstrate rolling mills. Okay, sweat soldering is the toughest to do. So learn butt and right angle first. And you'll have success when you get to sweat soldering. All right.